Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sword and Tea. I am Derek Sword. I am the sword half of this Sword and Tea and Sword and Key in general. I see him pronouns. I am joined by Andy Boyd, game designer and writer of Substratum Protocol, one of the newest games to be featured from Pandion Games. First of all, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you yourself have a nice cup of tea to enjoy this chat with us. I personally am enjoying Mistress Gray from friends of ours, Friday Teas. Definitely give them a check out if you haven't before. We're a fantastic local Seattle tea company that you can purchase from anywhere, and is a great just local brand that supports pretty much everybody. Fantastic person, fantastic brand. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to say before this stuff because typically I'm running TTRPGs on here. But I don't need to introduce any of that kind of stuff. We're gonna sit and chat about a fantastic game, a game that I've really had an immense pleasure reading through the PDF that was provided. It is one of the more unique games I have seen recently, and so I'm very excited to feature a lot of the mechanics about it. And hopefully by the end of this, you are just as excited to play this as I am. So. All that said, I definitely want to let my guests introduce themselves as well. So, Andy, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. So I am the lead designer slash owner for Pandion Games. We've been designing and making games now for 3 years, so 2021. But before that, we ran D&D and Pathfinder and, the traditional games that everybody seems to have gotten their start with. Um, and we kind of broke into the game design field doing Quest RPG like adventures and player aids and stuff like that. And that kind of led us down this path where here we are running crowdfunding campaigns and going on interviews and stuff like that. But yeah, that's who I am.
That's awesome. And we're very glad to have you, and we're definitely really excited to talk about Substratum Protocol. Um, Before we get into some of the other amazing people that worked on this, the mechanics, all the cool stuff that makes this game stand out so significantly in a way that I think that it does. Let's do like a quick elevator pitch. What is Substratum Protocol? What are we looking like we're getting ourselves into with a game like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Substratum Protocol, the premise behind Substratum Protocol is the world is ending and has fractured and cracked itself apart. And you are a team of scientists that were part of this protocol that the government had called the Substratum Protocol, and it has been initiated. And so, during the apocalypse, they have uh, taken you to this hastily built fracture observatory that is just this massive gash across the world. And whether you want to or not, you are now part of this expedition that is going to be delving to the center of the Earth to learn what's happening, reach the center of the planet, and hopefully survive long enough to put a stop to whatever is causing this apocalypse.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think in that sense, it definitely has that kind of like natural disaster sort of feel to it, but there's definitely like a cosmic horror to this as well, because it's not just going to the center of the earth. It's not just that we're looking at layers of, dirt and a molten core and
Right.
whatever else. That like stuff gets weird down there.
Yeah, we started like everything that we did throughout the game and the story of the game, we started with like hard scientific facts, and then we expounded cosmic horror and oddities and sci-fi and layered those in, going all the way down. And the idea is that like when you start at the very top of the towards the crust of the earth, right? It is the most logical, it's the most what we're familiar with. There's still strange things happening. Um, but then as you delve deeper and deeper, whatever it is that's causing the apocalypse above is also like just completely messing with reality and tearing it
Hmm.
apart. And your scientists, and a part of the game is like balancing between like your logical side and the fact that like these are unknowable, you know, truths that are occurring that are just beyond comprehension kind of thing.
It definitely feels like as the further down you go, the math gets harder until the math stops working altogether.
Yep.
I
And it
love
just
that.
becomes feels.
Yeah, just becomes field. No more symbols, no more math.
Yep.
Um, we'll talk a little about your inspirations here. But first, like I said, I do want to definitely shout out the some of the people that helped work on this in addition to yourself. So, illustrations, Galen Peugeot, edited by Eric Lejour, Renee Pierre, and Deshaya Galina.
Mhm.
I'm going to guess on that one. Unfortunately, I apologize to my very American pronunciation. But development and editing by both of those. Actually, Renee has been a guest on this show as well. Layout direction from Tony Train and art direction from Elisa Boyd. So, yeah, fantastic folks, many of whom we have seen here, or we've at least seen kind of around doing some of the awesome stuff that you all do. So, Pandion Games is really one of those names that keeps coming up time and time again with these very unique, well thought out games that aren't just your standard sword and board, kind of like fantasy exploration. You're really taking these really cool themes, and I absolutely love to see that. um Speaking of that, and the again, the concept, the unique concept, what were some of your inspirations for this whole thing, for the concept itself, for the gameplay?
So this originally started as a hack, not a hack. Actually, yeah, it was a hack for a game jam, for a breathless game jam done by RP, Renee
Mhm.
Pierre, and it was a little four-page concept, and it was really inspired by Substratum, not Substratum Protocol, Subnautica, and In
Sure.
Other Waters, and things like that. And I kind of coined the term deep delving mystery because I didn't know what else to call these things, right? You're a scientist, you're alone, you're trying to survive, but it's really about gathering knowledge. Um, and so, and it's always somewhere deep, deep underwater, deep below the ocean, deep under the, Earth's surface, things like that. So deep
Somewhere
delving
humans are
mysteries.
not meant to be. Yeah.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
And something's gone awry.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, deep delving mystery genre is kind of what I decided to call the things that have inspired me. Those were the main ones, and then also some things like Armageddon and other, like, apocalyptic, let's go save the planet kind of um, movies and shows, all of which do not feature combat, which is really important for if anybody's like, what is Pandion's thing? Uh, it's not that we don't have fighting in our games, it's that we don't have rules for it. And if you do it, you're going to be doing it in some other way, right? It's not a
Absolutely.
focus of our games. And the same thing with Substratum. So, um, did that, and then as we were working through our last campaign, I was looking back at Substratum Protocol, and it hadn't gotten a lot of attention, and I was like, this, like, the concept's really, really cool. I want to do something more with it and really make it a full game. And so then we started working on it, and so that's why you still see a lot of Breathless legs on it, is because that's what it started as. But we added in our mystery system and another game mechanics by RP called Firelights. That's where our card mechanics
Mhm.
come from. And so we kind of like worked and really built on how do we do something unique with this, while allowing a mystery to unfold. Because we love making mysteries. It's one of my favorite genres of games to make. We have a whole system dedicated to it for that purpose because we love mystery games so much. So this is kind of all the things that we've been playing with for the last year and a half, 2 years, culminates in Substratum Protocol.
I think the mystery thing is one of the things I love best about it. I love a book that gives you unanswered questions and puts it up to, whoever's playing, whether it's the GM to set that up or whether it's all the players together to figure out what the answer to that mystery is. It's not handed to you. You all get to decide together what the answer to that mystery is. And I think that's
Yeah,
the cool thing about cosmic horror and mysteries and things like that is, do you really want to know? What are the
right.
consequences when you do find out? Um,
Yeah,
I'll
and
say
that's
just
actually
kind of,
one of the. Oh, go ahead.
no, please, please.
Oh, I was going to say that's one of the core mechanics of Substratum Protocol, and what's our we call the hints and hijinks system. Is it's based around this idea of you're going to get a bunch of questions and tidbits, and depending on what you get of clues. So like there's 36 different clues, and those clues lead to 36 different questions for the players to answer, and where you got the context and where you found the clues will all make you come up with different ideas of what's going on. And how many clues you find is like, did you get that right? So you're
Hmm.
the player is ultimately in charge of the answer. We never give an answer in the book. We have no idea what's going on.
Absolutely. It does kind of feel like scientific method the game, which also is really fun because how good are you? You have
Yep.
to make a hypothesis. How much testing did you actually do? Did you do
Yep.
retesting? What evidence did you actually find? But yeah, like the scientific method when it has the high stakes of the apocalypse weighing on it. Uh one of the inspirations that I kind of saw from this, whether intentional or not, that I was kind of picking up on there actually too. Um, Eberron, the D&D setting,
Oh,
also has like the concept that when you dig underground, like it has three dragons that made the whole existence of Eberron. One's in space, one is the planet itself, and then the evil one got like surrounded by the planet. So technically, the further
that's
you
cool.
dig in, you dig into layers of chaos. So like dwarves have this
I
whole
like
thing
that.
where they are fighting aberrations the further they go down. They just keep finding these demi-planes. Like every single layer is just like, oh, here's a layer of screaming, and then they go down and it's a layer where it's all French cats with thumbs, and it's just every layer is just total chaos. So that I also had like that concept of, yeah, the further you dig, you don't know what you're going to find down there. And then I don't know if you might be familiar with this. This is one of those weird internet things, but Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. Are you familiar with
Yes,
that?
yes.
Okay,
I've
yeah,
had I've had multiple people holler at me about that, and they were like, "This
yeah,
is Mystery Flesh Pit National Park," and I was like, "Okay, like I was not thinking about it while I was making this, but the owners of Knave of Cups, which is an online retailer that we absolutely
hmm,
love, and we talk to them all the time, they send me creepy stuff because they know that I like sci-fi, horror, mystery stuff,
fantastic.
and one
Yeah,
of the things was the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, and I like dove deep on all of that. But that was like a year and a half ago, and like I hadn't really ever gone back to it. And so it wasn't on purpose a core inspiration, but clearly it
yeah.
made an impact on me.
Definitely not a one-to-one. I mean that, but I think that you
Yeah,
could use these rules to do a Mystery Flesh Pit game. Yeah,
absolutely.
no, just that eldritch quality where it also has the corporate like sponsorship part to it as
Yes.
well. That's something I always love when it comes to cosmic horror is, oh, you're the suit that's going to keep you alive from such and such LLC. And it's just we have to
Yep.
throw in, the brand sponsorship. And yeah, I always
Yeah.
love that Mystery Flesh Pit had like a Pepsi sponsorship for a period of
Right.
time. It makes it so the mundanity makes it so more surreal at the
Yeah.
end of it. Yeah. No,
Well, it
I
also helps me add in like some humor to the game,
for sure.
because this
Yeah.
could be a really dark game, like if it's just like straight, like especially once you get through character creation, which we'll talk about, where it's just like, wow, everything's terrible, the world's falling apart, are we even going to be able to get anything done? But like we throw in these pieces of humor like the subsuits and Beepo Bop, the drone that you
I'll
get,
beep bop the drone.
and
Yes, so good.
like these little side comments that occur throughout the book, and that's just all to be like, it doesn't all have to be serious. It's okay. Like we can still laugh at the table while we're playing this.
Yeah. And I think that again lends to a lot of the media that this might fall into the overall category of like Fallout, a very depressing setting where you need the humor of it. And any type of like the like over corporatized space games that have come out
Yep.
in recent history. Let's go ahead and actually talk a little bit about gameplay here because
Mhm.
we talk about a lot of one-page games on this show. We also talk a lot more every now and then about some games like this one, which has an 88-page PDF. Um, when we're looking at dice, we're actually looking a little bit like we often see games that have, you're going to use only D6s, only D10s. I noticed in your game you actually use pretty much every dice in a
All of them.
standard D&D set. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then some, including a deck of playing cards. If I'm
Yeah. So
yeah,
the only dice that we don't use regularly is the D20. So
right.
D12 down to actually a D2 is something that you might be playing with. and the D2s come in during special occasions. But the main dice roll mechanics is you are going to assign dice skills. You're going to assign skills to dice, and those dice have sizes. So you might assign a D10 to one skill, a D8 to another, a D6 to your third, and the rest are D4s. And whenever you use that skill, you're going to roll that die, and it might actually degrade because you've used it. So it'll go from a D10 to a D8 after you've used it.
Hmm.
And that kind of gives that survival aspect. This is very Breathless. Anybody that's played Breathless, this is where this comes from.
Hmm.
Is the step down mechanics, and it's all about survivability and like emulating this. Like as you do things, you're wearing yourself out. Um, but yeah, you're using all the dice.
Yeah. Um, and then the playing cards as well come into it. So this
Oh
is
yeah,
full deck of playing cards with the jokers removed.
yeah,
That's something we don't see often in TTRPGs, or at least it'll be a TTRPG that only uses a deck of cards or tarot cards, something like that.
yeah.
Where do cards come into this?
So this is one of my favorite things about this entire system is the cards and what you can do with cards. And for us, this is still kind of it's a fleshed out mechanic, but something we want to play with a lot more into the future. So future games, you're going to see cards from us. But the idea is that your cards are your difficulty of what it is that you're trying to do. So your skill checks, right? And so what you'll do is you'll be like, I want to confront this thing, whatever it is, whether it's a creature or a pile of rocks. You want to confront a pile of rocks in order to break it down. And you're going to be assigned a skill that you have to use, and then you get to choose another skill to use, and that's where you can add in some role play and some narrative to choose that skill or item. And then you're going to draw two cards, and you're going to roll your dice, sum them, and then you're going to see if you beat the value of those cards. And whatever card values you beat, you can collect those cards into your hand, and you get to use those to power the abilities of your exosuit by discarding them in different ways. And then it's a 30% kind of success with a complication, and then failure with a complication
Hmm.
kind of split. So if you don't beat any cards, failure with a complication, bad things are happening. You might actually be told to go to another special action that you have to do and roll again immediately. So your dice are going to degrade again. Something bad might happen. It kind of steps like that. If you beat one of them, success with a complication, you did pretty good. And then if you beat both of them, it's a total success with no complication.
I love that. I also noticed it's said in the book at one point that players should always be aware if an action is going to result in character death. That this isn't a game
Yes.
of just like, offing characters left and right. That this is, it's a story,
Yes.
and that failure should move things forward, not necessarily just automatically punish people left and right, which I think is always a great thing to throw out.
Yeah. I
Another
think
thing, sorry,
I
please.
think for like just in gameplay in general, it is better unless you're playing a highly like people die all the time kind of game. But generally, I think narrative deaths that are impactful are more impactful. Like people are okay with their characters dying if they're like, I got to go out and like I knew I made the choice. I knew I was going to make that sacrifice, and I'm doing it
Absolutely.
anyway. And that's something we love to bake into our games when there is death possible. To just basically say, let the players know it's coming, let them make the choice that bad stuff's going to happen, but they can be a hero. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, to reference one of the inspirations, I don't think anybody would have found it very narratively fulfilling if Bruce Willis died in the first 10 minutes of landing on the meteor in Armageddon. You need
Yeah.
that narrative sacrifice. Absolutely. Um, I think one thing that is important to also note is while this is a game that can be played with players and have a GM, this also can be played solo as well.
Yes.
So I don't want to overlook those mechanics because we do have a number of people who do really enjoy solo games and kind of find those to be very impactful for their own storytelling like chops to build up their skills as a storyteller. How
I
do
think
the mechanics change for between a group versus an individual?
so. The base system behind Substratum Protocol is called Hints and Hijinks, and it was actually designed as a solo system to begin with. So we have actually tacked on multiplayer on top of a solo system rather than what a
Okay.
lot of people do and have this awesome multiplayer system. And they're like, well, and here's how you can play solo.
Hmm.
And so we did it kind of in reverse. And what we did is we've learned over time that there are two camps to solo players that we know about. There's the solo journaling games, kind of like lyrical games, the simpler games,
Hmm.
like our little mystery games that we publish. Those are all journaling games, right? You're led along the story, you're being asked prompts, you're writing in your journal your answers to these different kinds of things. And it's a fantastic way to play. I actually enjoy playing that way. It's a simpler way to play solo games. We have those rules in there where if you're familiar with our hints and hijinks mysteries, you can play Substratum Protocol exactly like a hints and hijinks mystery where you follow the steps of you go to a sector, you have a complication that occurs, you resolve it, and then you move to the next. And by the time that you get to the end, what you've collected is what you have to basically initiate in game.
Sure.
And you're kind of led through. Whereas there's the second group of people where they prefer like using GM emulators and they like to use like have their books of ways to generate content. Basically, they're using, I'm going to say algorithms for lack of a better word, to emulate a game master in some way.
Hmm.
And that's how they're playing their solo games. And so we created a rule set for that where we say, okay, you're going to create a character and you're going to be a team lead, and you also have a team, and they have a dedicated solo team sheet, and their skills start a little bit higher, but you define all three of these characters on one character sheet, and they act as a single kind of unit, just so you don't have this huge overhead of management of individual characters. And as they take stress and maybe they die, the skill dice actually reduce permanently to represent the reduction of the number of people within the team.
Right. Yeah.
But otherwise, you play as normal using kind of a GM emulator method. So we have both of those rules put in there.
I love that. Yeah, because I personally always find it tougher to play against myself
Yeah.
and feel like I'm I need
Yeah.
somebody else to be my personal antagonist, or to be the antagonist by if I'm not that I'm
Well, and some
antagonistic
people aren't
GM or
looking
anything.
for a like sitting down for the evening and having that much complication involved.
That's true.
There's
Yeah.
there like I'm personally like when I do get to sit down and play a game, I'm like I need it to be simple. I need to be able to get it done in the next 2 hours because I like this is the only time I've got right now.
Yeah, your little bit of
And
serotonin is so so tenuous.
yeah,
One thing I do also want to shout out is that this game is essentially no prep. That you can just sit down with the rules right in front of you and just start a game. And I
yeah.
think that's a beautiful thing about a book that has 88 pages.
Yes, that's actually one of the things that we try to do with all of our games is low to no prep. It came from the very first game that we ever made, and we had actually written that game because we were living in an RV at the time,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, I still want to play our TTRPGs, but I'm going to be at different campsites every 3 days or 4 days or a week, and different people, and I don't have a table. I can't use dice. I can't write like I and there's no prep, right? I need to be able to sit down, teach the rules, and create a story on the spot around a campfire with complete strangers. And so we made that game, and that kind of like set us down this path of like, oh, hey, you can do this. This is cool. Um, and so pretty much that's why you'll see a lot of our games have this like little to no prep is to be able to facilitate that.
That's really cool. I've never heard of that like form of inspiration, but it 100% makes sense to to have those limited resources and have to make do. I have a number of friends who, served in the military as well, and they talk about playing Dungeons and Dragons and how that can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes because you're trying to also get dice and the resources and
Yep.
everything. So yeah, I have to imagine that this is a game that would cater to a lot of people. Even thinking about us, how hard is it to structure an in-person game depending on where you are in the world? And hey, here you go. They don't need anything. You
Yeah.
just sit down.
It's actually
Yeah.
I want to revisit that game to kind of bring some of the ways that we do resolution in that game
Hmm.
into another one and make it bigger because it was first game. A few people know about it, but not a lot of people. But the resolution is basically there are knowledge, skill, and physical tasks.
Hmm.
And the GM or the player gets to choose kind of what they do. And it can be things like name three different types of plant species that are around you. Flip a bottle, right? And if it lands on its top, it's a critical success. If it lands on its bottom, it's a success with a cost. And if it fumbles and fails over, it's a critical failure, right? It's stuff like that where it's like, what do you have around you? Make a game with it that has a 30% chance of success.
I love that.
Um, yeah. And I'm like, we should probably bake that into another game here in the future.
I'm now I'm realizing it's not an original thought because the second that I thought about it, I realized that there's a famous podcast that's utilizing it somewhat. But I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Ohio. Technically the Midwest. It's
Illinois.
one of those weird states. Um, Cornhole would be a fantastic thing
Yes.
to do, especially at a campsite. I'm realizing that the McElroy brothers from the Adventure Zone have utilized that in their Dadlands game, but
Okay.
there just goes to show it you can absolutely use it. It's more of a skill based thing than anything. It's still great. So talking a little bit about skill checks, which I always love looking at skill checks for a specific game because skills are how a player interacts with the world around them. And I love how games will define and narrow down or expand on the standard, physical versus mental versus emotional. What do skills look like in Substratum Protocol?
So you've got six skills. So it's make, dash, evade, break, think, and sway. Um, which is uh, you know, kind of your standard skills. We can tie them back to the skills that we all know and love. But underneath, we also give some additional like what these can be used for. So like make can be about trapping, repairing, building. Dashing is running, jumping, fleeing in certain ways. So we give a bunch of ways, and this is both for the GM and for the players to kind of understand like, evading isn't just dodging. It could also be shielding or obscuring.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we've kind of defined those out for people. But I think what's kind of neat is during character creation, we only give you three dice to actually assign to those six skills, and the rest of them are going to sit at baseline, which is a D4, which means you're rolling two skills together, so you can get a decent, roll still, because you're summing them, but they're going to be low, and you're
Yeah.
probably going to be forced to use those skills at some point. You can't just avoid them.
Absolutely. But there are ways to increase. I'm looking at
Yes.
well, definitely stress is going to be part of this, and I love when
Yes.
stress is part of a game.
Yeah.
I love the implication, the heaviness that comes to that. But we also have deep breath, overclock.
Hmm.
Um, Storage unit, is that a skill or is that
It's inventory.
it's inventory? Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Um,
So
uh, please.
there are special items. So kind of how we
Mhm.
break this apart is there are items that you can use in place of your skills. Those are kind of special items that you have to craft or make in some way, or you get one at the beginning. Otherwise, you kind of have to narratively find them, or you have to craft them.
Mhm.
And they have a dice associated with them as well. And the idea is that you can use the item in place of a skill. You can only carry three at a time. And pretty much then any other item that you find within the game is a narrative item. It is something that can help you do something narratively, but mechanically it doesn't come into play.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about stress, deep breath,
I
overclocking,
love
things
stress.
that can reduce that skill die. How do
Yeah.
those work mechanically?
So, since we're talking about skills, the really, really important thing for people to understand about the skills, because they degrade fairly quickly,
Hmm.
and people will be like, well, then I become useless really quickly, is deep breath is the player at any time can say, I'm taking a deep breath. You reset all of your skills back to the maximum, and mission control, or GM,
Hmm.
says there's a complication, and here's what it is every time you take a deep breath. But you can take a deep breath even in the middle of a conflict or combat or running or flee at any time, you can say, taking a deep breath and resetting these skills. And that's when the GM says, okay, and this happens. So it's a way to offset these degrading skills and letting the player think, being like, oh, can I, I haven't seen the cards yet, but maybe we've seen a couple face cards, and so maybe I'll grab a 3 and an 8. I don't know. Like maybe I can roll with the 2d4s that I have to roll with, or do I take a deep breath?
Yeah,
Kind of thing, and
yeah.
reset and take that complication. That complication might mean I have to roll again. Is that worth it? And so we really like that. Um, Putting players into a mental conflict of what to do is I just love doing it mechanically.
Yeah,
Um,
the strategic gambling is such a cool thing. It's almost
yeah,
a sub mechanic in and of itself. Absolutely love
yeah.
it. Please.
And then stress is this other thing where we wanted to create it in such a way that players have to make mechanically interesting decisions. I think that's a big theme throughout this entire game is it's rules light, but you can interact and you can make decisions mechanically as much as you want to. You can interface with that, but it's optional. So stress is one where, again, like health, it as if you run out of stress completely, you end up dying in some way,
Hmm.
or there's a critical failure of your suit, something to that effect. However, as you take stress, you unlock what we call portal influence, and it is these unique abilities that stack that give you narrative control, or at the very top tier of stress. Like if you have 8 stress, um, you basically automatically succeed at one of the most critical actions that you're going to need to take, which is understanding portal clues.
Hmm.
So instead of rolling to see if you understand it, and actually you might take stress because of it or have to get rid of the portal clue, once you're at 8 stress, whatever clues you've uncovered, you personally as the character, you succeed that action because you have opened yourself up to the portal. You just comprehend the unknowable, right? But you're also so close to dying, you've got to be really careful. Um,
Absolutely.
we give players the ability to take a fundamental law of the universe and change it in some way per deep breath. So you could be like, gravity's inversed now, or
Hmm.
it's half as light, so I can jump really high now. You can make those changes, and then there's others that change things differently in other narrative ways. But that's as you gain more stress. So stress is both your health and a way to unlock some cool abilities, so you can do really interesting things.
That's
And stress is
all.
also kind of hard. It's a survival game, so once you take stress, it does become difficult to get rid of stress. There's only two
Yes.
ways in the game to do so, and one is discarding cards
Hmm.
to basically ask your exosuit to bring its med bay online to heal you,
Hmm.
and the other way is to take the travel action, and that is hopefully whoever led the travel action rolls well, and if they do, players get to reduce their stress while they're traveling.
So when they're discarding cards, the because the cards are kind of like a newer concept. What's the real penalty of that? Is like when you get down to having no cards to draw from, is does that character death? How does that translate in game?
So, basically, how it works is if you can collect cards. So basically, whenever you make your skill check, you collect a card in your hand, whatever card you beat, and those cards can be discarded in different ways
Hmm.
to either heal yourself or level up or create items. Right there's all of these different effects. So if you have no cards in your hands, that's fine. You can do that.
Okay.
We do have an optional set of rules that we created to add environmental like damages to people, to players. That's the only time where not having cards in your hand might be tricky because, like, for instance, one of the things we have in there is if there's a pocket of dense radiation, your suit is going to turn on active and anti-radiation measures. And you
Sure.
are going to start discarding cards every 5 minutes of real world time until you're out of cards, and then you're going to start taking damage yourself because it
Okay.
has no. But that's an optional rule. That doesn't
Right.
have like that's something that we specifically are like, this makes the game really deadly. Be careful. Um, but otherwise, the only other you don't want to hoard cards because if the GM runs out of a deck, their deck of cards and they can no longer shuffle their discard and start drawing cards again.
Mhm.
Everybody has to discard all of their cards. It
Okay.
just resets. And so if everybody's trying to collect 8 cards at once in order to level up, that might become a problem really fast.
Right.
Because you're going to run out of cards.
A good lesson for those who are resource hoarders out there who always tried to hold on to the very end to use everything that they have. A good note to have. Yeah, because I'm seeing
And
right.
realistically, we hope that we're given enough options to players where they're going to be discarding cards, if nothing
Yeah,
else, to help other people succeed. Like if you can discard 2 cards and add one to somebody else's skill check or your own skill check, right? And so like
absolutely.
maybe if you're a resource hoarder and you're not empathetic at all, yeah, you might collect all those cards. But
I think that where you're talking about how, quickly skills do degrade, I think that absolutely does play into the balance of, yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing, repair and heal, discard 2 cards, boost action, discard 2 suited cards, and then absolutely the systems upgrade, like you mentioned. So essentially to level up, discarding 8. Yeah, a lot of balance to that, so that people aren't just constantly finding themselves in that pit that they can't dig themselves out of.
yeah.
But even then, like we said before, failure is not always a bad thing. Failure is a narrative tool.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So let's talk about just in like well, I guess a typical game. A typical might not be the best word here with a game that could literally lead anywhere and do almost anything. But maybe an ideal game. Maybe that's a better
Mhm.
word for that. Um, we do character creation. We start playing. What is like the story arc of gameplay look like?
So this is really interesting because everybody that I've talked to has an idea of starting the game differently, and I
Cool.
love that. Some people want to start in the Fracture Observatory, others it's like within action.
Yeah.
And so like one of the questions I pose to people is cinematically, how do you view the opening, right? Is
Hmm.
it, a Halo 3 style opening where you are, falling into the fracture on parachutes and just kind of like hell diving, right? Like into
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fracture. Do you descend on an elevator where, the horrors of the outside slowly like go quiet as all you hear is the clinking of the chain, right? It's a bit more horror-esque.
Hmm.
Or, do you start with having a conversation in the ready room or, the situation room with the Fracture Observatory, lead and the mission control, right? So how people want to start, I think, will also help set the vibes of the game. But from a perspective of ideal gameplay, um, it really depends on, in my opinion, if you want to do a campaign or like a one shot. One shot, you want to get players in, right? We hit the ground running. We have that first action scene of diving into the fracture, and then it really becomes up to the player as to how quickly they want to move forward. So we could spend an entire session at a single sector. There's 10 sectors. In a single sector, exploring and checking out lore and cool things and gathering clues. But the players have the control to be like, we're ready to move on. I'm going to take the travel action. And whoever wants
Hmm.
to lead that makes the roll. And then we go to the next sector. And so it's kind of this back and forth, and its heritage comes from the Hints and Hijinks games of you go to a sector, you have a complication happen, the players can explore, maybe they gather and or create their own lore, they find some clues, and then the players go, it's time, and we go to the next sector. So whenever it's really up to it, the pace can really be up to the players. The GM can really kind of set that by being like, cave-ins are happening, death's happening, we gotta go, right? Kind of thing. Or they can just let it lull and the players are like, well, I guess we're done here, time to travel. So kind of both of those options. Players in control of like when they are continuing on. Um, Say they get all the way down to the bottom. They have a set number of clues. They've taken those clues and they've understood the majority of them. We have what's actually an in-game trigger. So we love telling full stories rather than open-ended stories. So you have beginning, middle, and end. And oh, go ahead. Is he frozen?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sword and Tea. I apologize for the abrupt break there. My computer decided to do, honestly, the most polite blue screen that I've ever experienced in my life. So, did a little quick reboot, but decided it was probably a good time for a break anyway. So, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for joining us in the first place for our discussion of Substratum Protocol, one of the newer games from Pandion Games. And we are joined by Andy, game creator, game designer, game writer. I also did want to mention, as I didn't do that earlier, that there is currently a backer kit for this game that you can go and support at this very moment. There are 11 days still left to back it. It is currently funded, but you can unlock more art, more expanded rules, and it is always a good time to grab a copy, as if you have not seen already, you will see even more of that this game is one of the more unique things to add to your collection and to add to your table. This is already an amazing game to have fun with your friends and a quick and easy thing to bring to a table of people who haven't played TTRPGs before, or even as Andy mentioned, if you are somebody who travels a lot, introduced to complete strangers, and make new friends along the way. Which, as somebody who also did a lot of RV travel, at one point in my life, yeah, that's such a great tool for being out and making those bonds. Um, we were just talking about this off camera, or off stream. We don't remember exactly where we left off, so we're just going to jump back into stuff and hope for the best. Um, Looking at least where I was with the PDF open,
Yes.
it's not very helpful. I believe we were talking about like an ideal type of game to have.
Yes.
So yeah, you were talking about how like different openings can vary, but what it actually looks like when we actually get into the gameplay itself.
Yeah. So I'm going to recap some of this for the people that were on stream, but
Of course.
the idea is that you're going to go to a sector and complications are going to arise. You're going to explore it. You're going to kind of uncover uh, different bits and pieces and clues and just kind of explore the environment as well. And all during all of this, there's going to just be chaos around you, right? Because you're in the middle of a cave, cavern, fracture system that's cracked open and things are getting weird. We have different levels in there, like caustic pools that actually have like floating islands within these acidic pools. That how do you get to them? You see that there's life on one of them. There's potentially a structure, like a physical structure that looks to be built in some capacity out there. Overcoming things like that to go explore those things to potentially discover clues that will help you then ultimately solve the mystery. So you're going to go through all these different levels, and at the end, we actually have an in-game trigger, and the players actually initiate the end game. So you can get all the way down to the portal, you can see what the portal's doing, and you'd be like, I don't think we're ready for this yet, and you can back out and you continue to explore. But when the players are ready, they can be like, and they can do this at any time. They could go down to Sector 1 and be like, we're ready, we're initiating in game. That would be silly, but they could do it. An end game starts where the players work together and look over the clues and the not and what they've answered as questions, and they have to basically write out or explain to the GM how each one of these pieces together in however they want. Like what is happening? Why is it happening? How could it be stopped? Like put together a cohesive theory. And for every single clue they use within that theory, their portal skill, which is this kind of hidden skill going on in the background, it starts at a D0, which is you have no knowledge, and it can go all the way up to D20 plus a modifier, which
Hmm.
is, you know, the whole idea is that if you spend a lot of time collecting clues and getting knowledge, you're pretty likely to succeed. You're going to have some really bad rolls to otherwise not succeed. Um, and then everybody is getting two cards. And in order to win the game, you're going to roll your portal skill and I believe one other skill of your choice. I don't know. That one's changed a couple times. I'll have to look as to which it is. Um, it is You roll, okay, yeah, you're gonna roll your portal skill, but you can burn cards and burn stress to modify your roll if needed, which you can do all at all times.
Hmm.
Um, and so the idea is that you're gonna want to do these final skill checks, and it's a montage. So the player says, "This is what I'm doing to implement the final hypothesis," and you roll, and the GM narrates what's happening as you roll and as that outcome happens, and we go to the next person, and we kind of go around the table. And for it to be a success, you have to beat at least half the cards, of for the whole group. That's
Sure.
basically a group roll, and whatever happens at that moment, whether you have the scientists all die, or they succeed and they close the portal, or they whatever's happening, and it's wonderful. We then fast forward 6 months, whether the scientists are all gone or not. We fast forward 6 months, and we go around and we ask, like, what is the world like now? Like,
Hmm.
from what we knew, what happened, and the outcome. Let's see what our expedition created, or the outcome of our expedition.
Yeah.
And then your game's done. So you have that closure there at the end after this big adventure of everything that you've done.
That's really cool to think about that, I think right when things kind of cut off with my computer, we were talking about the difference between one shot and a campaign, and how, one shot, you like you use the verb hell dive, which I've been experiencing a lot of lately.
Yeah.
You go right in the deepest portion, you figure out stuff, you get the clues quick. A lot of our one shots are 3 hours, 3 hour session, you save the world. But to have a campaign of just like every single day being in the surreal to almost like the mentally fracturing of this other world, this cosmic horror just verse within the earth itself, and then finally getting out has such a cool weight to it. I'm also looking at travel montages, montages being a really cool, almost like pseudo mechanic of this game,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
you're able to kind of, pass time quickly and have people kind of narrate what they're going through. I always loved the use of that in games.
So that actually
Uh,
came from the
yeah.
fact that we wanted this to still be rooted in some science, some
Mhm.
scientific, hard, like sci-fi-esque writings. And we basically did all the math of, how far is it from the surface to the core? If we divide that between our sectors, here's how deep each sector is going to be. What is the walking speed of a human? What's the spelunking speed of a human? Because that's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
And figuring out, like, okay, how many days will this actually take? And it comes out to 150 days one way for people to walk to the core. And we were
Yeah.
like, we don't want players thinking they have to play out each individual day, or even GMs thinking they have to play out each individual day. And so that's where the travel mechanic actually comes from, is
Hmm.
this, like, focus on where the action is, the cool, interesting bits, and then we need to montage over to the next interesting bit, which is the next sector, right?
Hmm.
And then you spend your time doing the interesting things in the next sector, and then we montage to the next one. Instead of being like, well, it's going to take us 150 game sessions, and
Yeah.
so we're
What
going to
what do you
walk,
all talk about for 150 days? Yeah.
right? So we wanted to make it very, very clear. It's like, it will take 150 days of world time. You don't have to play all of those. We can summarize.
I love that. I also love the kind of, again, we talked about how open-ended stuff is very cool. It lets people, really create stuff of their own or be inspired with stuff. Looking at the NPCs and sentient creatures, that was definitely something when you were mentioning, life on islands, and like
Yeah.
what would the things you would find in the center of the earth look like? Or even if they're not really coming from the center of the earth, if they're coming from somewhere else but presenting there. Yeah, that's a really cool concept too. The whispering fog is definitely something that is going to haunt my nightmare. So I appreciate that. Just those
Yeah.
three words, those two words alone, whispering fog is great.
Yeah.
What's I guess, are there any specific monsters, like if you were going to create your own monster manual for this, are there any things that you personally would really want to include in that?
So we have, do you have the preview up in front of you, or do you have
I
the
I have
full?
the press copy in front of me. Yeah.
Okay. So we do have a bestiary in the game, of
Okay. I
20
had not
character
gotten
of
that far. Okay.
No, that's fine. Um, And these are we've created these creatures. There's actually 100 creatures that we've created that this list stems from. It was for a different game. And so these are the ones that we felt um, fit the vibes of Substratum Protocol and kind of the more eldritchy horror-esque things.
Hmm.
And so we've actually worked to and Galen is fantastic. Our artist has been fantastic because these had no art whatsoever, just the descriptions. And I was like, here's 20 of them. You just want to make art for whatever calls to you? Like, I have no visual reference for what these things are going to look like. I don't think visually. I'm a word person. And he came back and I was just like, yeah, this is it. Um, but so for instance, we talk about everything from these really giant creatures that like squeeze rocks for nutrients and the friction of them moving through the rocks. They have a pillar that you can actually see, except it is molten hot because it's the radiator to evacuate the heat from them moving through these rocks.
Hmm.
And then the this unknown scientist that writes notes throughout the entire book has just filled the field notes with their own notes. And they're like, you know, super scary. Don't be close to this thing. But hey, it's a good source of molten slag if you need like some iron in order to craft things. Like this is where you get it from. And so we try to do that with just a little bit of everything. And some things get weird for like the library lattice,
Hmm.
which is this creature. It is a lacy vine-like creature, but it like forms itself into this lattice work that captures images of things that have happened around it. So it creates a visual history of the things that go on in its presence. So different things like that are occurring. There's others where like there's a small arachnid that build networks of thought. It connects thoughts between creatures and itself. Um, and so instead of weaving webs, its web material is these connections between minds
Hmm.
that it forms. All sorts of crazy stuff. We have you're a little more traditional, like a ghost wolf, which is, a semi-translucent wolf that will only kill when it's hungry, but it'll also just kind of stay at your periphery and be like, I'm going to be hungry in the next, like, I don't know, 2 days. So I'm just going to walk and stalk this thing, the scientists for the next 2 days and just be at its periphery, um, kind of thing. Uh, we just have just like all kinds of these weird, interesting creatures. And one of the reasons
Absolutely.
we went with our own creations is this everything can cause all of these creatures can cause a weird complication. All of these can be dangerous, but they're not inherently violent,
Hmm.
right? And we wanted that where it's like, hey, if we put a bunch of creatures in here, we don't want people to necessarily be like, this is something I'm gonna kill. It might be like, ooh, hey, this note in here says this hothouse jellyfish can be used correctly to make a crude cutting device. How do I do that? Right? Like, I want that. But it's also going to try to defend itself. So how do they go about doing that? It's not inherently violent, but because now the players are going to be like, well, I want a laser cutter made out of this jellyfish that's floating
Hmm.
around in the air. I'm going to harvest that. And the jellyfish is like, no, you're not. Right. So that's kind of how we work to structure every single one of these creatures is be like, here's some of the scientific lore. Here's some hints to how they could be causing complications or have dangers associated with them, but they're hints, right? There's no
Right.
stat blocks. They don't roll die. They, don't have special abilities to attack players. Um, so they're violent in the way of, you know, here, like there's one that's Rotavari is one that's in here, and it is basically a tall stalked plant filled with um, large vines, and it tracks prey with fruit, like it
Hmm.
fruits. It's a fruiting body, but it's got like teeth on it. So if you're like, I want that fruit, it's a carnivorous plant, right?
Yeah,
So
I'll,
it's
I'll
different
admit the
things like that.
artwork for that is one of the more upsetting because it's almost become the artwork has become like a
Yes,
wreath with like razor
yes.
blades around the center. It's very Parasite Mouth-esque. Um, Yeah, no, the artwork's fantastic. I'm looking specifically at the Brazzle fur, and I think
Yes.
what is very cool about the design of a lot of these is, much as you were saying, like when you're going into this this area, however alien it might be, it is an ecosystem. It's a biome.
Hmm.
You might go into the woods to hunt, but there's also going to be things that don't want to be hunted. You can go into the ocean. Sharks are not like actively out there to get you, but they are dangerous should you put
Yeah.
yourself in a position that is dangerous around them.
Yep.
The Brazzle fur is great just for the if not friend, why friend shaped. Great little
Yeah.
camouflage cat. Yeah, the ghost wolf. Actually, I'm really loving the Geo Bear as well, which
I love the
has
Geo Bear.
yeah, it's what's like a giant
Tardigrade.
uh tardigrade. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And yeah, I love how the similarities of, when you call something a such and such wolf, that we are making that connection to something that is mundane to us, but also references a danger, but also the alienness of it makes it somehow even stranger. That it's all, a ghost wolf. You think you know what that means. It's you. I don't think that that's what I personally would draw if I heard ghost wolf is
Right.
a completely invisible like alligator dog that would stalk you for
Right.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, no, those are really incredible. And yeah, the additional notes on all of them make them just really really fun. And that is one of my favorite parts of this book is um it's not just gameplay, it's not just in-game lore. It also has like the little journal notes that add a little bit of extra flavor to it, and maybe even can contradict sometimes,
Yes.
and that also adds
Yes.
an interesting quality to the storyline.
From you
Um,
were talking about the layout of the book, and this was a
yeah,
huge, huge challenge for us because, well, I mean, you see a lot of TTRPG books, and they are 2 column, 3 column style books, and
for
they're
sure.
rather clean laid out. This is not a cleanly laid out, like it's readable. It still uses a grid system, but it's not a cleanly laid out book. We were going for like a 1950s user manual plus scrapbooking plus a used field journal, right? And
Hmm.
so it could get very complicated and kind of messy really quick. And so we actually ended up where we would add content into each spread of the layout in layers at a time. And so we would say, here are the game rules. Here's the in-game like lore and notes like from the Fracture Observatory, like it's a field operation manual. And then on top of all that, we would add in these handwritten notes afterwards, after everything's in there, of the scientists contradicting or being upset about something or making notes about how they used something because they were on an expedition. You never know who the scientist is who's
Hmm.
used this book that you hold. And then finally, we have these kind of this like cosmic symbolism throughout the book that just appears. Nobody ever talks about it, no one mentions it, but there is, strange symbolism and oddities uh, throughout the book. And so managing all those different layers while also being like, people need to be able to read this, people need to be able to reference it during gameplay, but it also needs to just be kind of total chaos at the same time.
Yeah.
Uh, it took so long. So I'm glad people are enjoying actually reading and looking at it.
No, it's beautiful. Honestly, you were just talking about, I mean, I'm looking at the splash page of the, I don't even know how to describe it. Just understand, the word understand written like back to back to back all over the entire page with
Oh yeah.
yeah, the pyramid inside of a circle inside of like what looks just to be like, I don't know. It's so eldritch and also like spongiferous in a way, and it looks like something you would find in like an alien ocean. And yeah, it's so cool. Um, I think that that's another cool thing that's in this book is, we do talk about the surreality of it, the caustic oceans with the islands and everything like that. But just speaking again to the creatures, how some of them are almost referential of animals that we're familiar with, that players might find structures that are not naturally built. That
Yeah.
might have been constructed by somebody else, something else deep down as well, and trying to find answers to those things. So it does seem to be that there is like that deeper mystery it's not it might be a cosmic mystery, but
Yeah.
something else might have figured it out before you, or something else might have made that mystery for you. And that's a really cool concept too.
It's
Um,
something that I love about so our all of the setting guide stuff is kind of they're all rolling tables of events that are occurring.
mhm,
And it's this idea of if you're playing through a game session and you might roll once or twice for a single sector before people are like, yeah, I've explored these complications, we've built, a story around it, and they move on. But they have all these other events that did not occur that might have taken them their thought and the story in a totally different direction because not
for
all the
sure.
events are linked. One event might say that you have found tubes leading from the caustic lake to an artificial structure, whereas none of the rest of the events mention artificial anything, right?
Hmm.
And so if you happen upon that, you're like, oh, wait a minute. And so it was this idea of just like, we want every game to work to be unique. So these combinations coming together, instead of giving any specific answer at any given time, just giving, more and more questions for people to answer throughout.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love a game where you don't answer all the questions at the end, where the
Yeah.
more questions you get, the more interesting it becomes. I also just throwing this out there as a point of appreciation because so often, inner Earth stuff can lend itself towards conspiracy theories. There are plenty of conspiracy theories out there
Yeah.
about, that we're there is some sort of something that lives beneath, or that we ourselves are inside of the world. That's also a theory that I've
Seen that. Yeah.
seen and heard. I appreciate that it doesn't delve too much, or really at all, as far as I've seen, into that. There's no talk of reptilians. There's no talk of Illuminati. Like,
Nope.
pyramidal symbolism is there in the sense that, like, you know there are pyramids, but it doesn't reference that. And I just want to show appreciation because it is very easy to fall into that. um but also on the other side, it gives me Alien versus Predator vibes, and I actually do appreciate that. I love that concept.
Yeah, definitely
um
in the art and a lot of the ways that we structure things of just like right. We had to give a survival aspect to it,
mm,
and I think that's where a lot of the Alien versus Predator comes up.
definitely, yeah. Yeah, the further down you go, and, oh, what made this, who left this here, and why. um that is one thing I want to touch on. Is we've talked a lot about a lot of the dangerous, even horrific aspects about
Hmm.
what you might encounter there. I always like to shout this out when books include this. In fact, this is kind of something we look for
Yeah.
when writers do include this. Content warnings, which
Yes.
are blatantly stated in this. So that is something that I think that's very important to any game, and to checking your players about what they're looking for, because this game could have almost anything. You list thalassophobia because, yeah, there might be an ocean. It might not be an ocean of water, and in that case, you move into the next thing.
Yep.
So I definitely want to shout that out, as something. It, I'll also ask this: do you think that there are overarching content warnings that folks might just be generally aware of? I know we've mentioned a lot of cosmic
Mhm.
horror, but anything just to, before people pick up the book, just to have in mind.
Yeah, so the content warnings that we do give are kind of the overall structure of what we have presented within the game. And then what we hope is that the GMs and the players sit down and have a conversation of like, what direction are we okay with this game going? Here's the ideas that I had. And then as you kind of build things out, but very much despair, depression, futility. I mean, the world's ended. We're not ended. It is crumbling quickly.
Hmm.
And so, you're part of this piece that's a last ditch effort. Is this a suicide mission? So all of that is kind of immediately in there. And so we present those. And then obviously claustrophobia, thalassophobia. So, I mean, this has to do with one, you're going to be in an exosuit, you're going to be underground, you're going to be in caverns, you're going to be in tight spaces.
For sure.
So if any of those are issues, and then the rest of it is we put a note in there because it is so open-ended on its world building, being like, from here, we need you guys to discuss what might be included in the game and have your tools ready. And I think we give, yeah, pause and rewind. we're big fans of X cards as well,
Hmm.
things like that. Um, and so because it is so open, it is tough to list out like additional content warnings beyond that, because it really comes down to the individual game that's being played.
Absolutely. And I think that a game like this also, the content warnings can only better help a GM shape the story that they're going to make. I think, especially when you have nothing but options, limitations can sometimes be
Yeah,
helpful. Um, well, we talked a lot about everything that a character might face in this, but it is not futile, right? They do have a lot of tools
they have a
presented
lot of
to them.
options.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about the some of the equipment that they have in the exosuit itself, because it looks
Yes.
like a lot of thought went into that. Obviously, the artwork's great, but Beepo Bop, I'd love to talk, like, great name for that.
Yes.
I would love to know if there is actually an answer to what the acronym for the exosuit actually stands for, or if it's just all guesses. Where did kind of inspiration for all this come from?
So the exosuit was something that was part of the core game. It's something I really wanted to. And then when we ended up getting into how to implement cards, I was like, oh, the exosuit abilities. And that's where we had to really sit down and be like, well, what is the exosuit now? Like, what? It's not just something that's protective. If we have abilities for it, it's got to have tools, it's got to have shapes and all this other fun stuff. And so we had written out a little bit of that. And then it was Galen who, during his sketches, his technical sketches to make the actual art, was labeling out. He was like, "This is where the 3D printer is, and this is where this is, and this is where this would be." And I was just like, "This is brilliant." And then he was like, "I think because it's such a long expedition, they've got to have some way to store, some place to sleep." And so now we have matter storage on the back with an inflatable habitat, right?
Hmm.
And so a lot of these came out of both writing the game for game mechanics and then also the art and concepts of thinking through, like, not realistically, but what do people potentially need in order to survive this, right? Um, but it was very much I forget what our original inspiration was, but it was I mean, obviously a 1950s era spacesuits kind of thing.
It does have that
Um,
Rocketeer sort of, well, not the
that's
Rocketeer, but yeah,
exactly
no,
it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's what we were
50s,
wanting.
yeah, absolutely.
And the only real direction that I gave our artist was it needs to be science aesthetic, right? It needs to be
Hmm.
science first. This is not a combat. This is not a soldier suit in order to go fight bugs on another planet. It is uh, in order to analyze and detect and help the um, occupant survive.
Hmm.
And so that aesthetic was huge in the way that it was actually designed. But so we have in the book, we actually list out like all the different little features that are on there. Some of them are narrative, some of them actually are mechanical based. So like the pilot health assistance and repair module, the farm module, short for pharmacy, of course. That's your, like, when you discard two cards and it heals it, it brings its medical systems online. That's that, right? And we actually point that out on the suit as to where it's that module is. The atomic 3D printer, we knew that the atomic 3D printer came about because I was like, we're delving into the depths. There's not supply drops for people to loot or gain materials or anything to that effect.
Right.
So we need a way for people to create. And what a better way than to have an atomic 3D printer that can sit there and just like print on your wrist what it is that you need.
Yeah.
Um, and then Beepo Bop actually came about because we were looking for drones. I was like, let's put a little drone in there in the artwork. It was actually not part of the game originally. And it was so cute what Galen created, where I was just like, that thing needs a name. It's got to be part of the game. Like, it's not even optional anymore. It was originally optional, where it was just like, one of the items you can have is a resource sampling drone. And I was like,
Hmm.
no, Beepo Bop just comes with the suits. And we even have a note in there at some, like, one of the notes that's like a little asterisk at the bottom where it's basically like, if you harm Beeple Bop, it will void the warranty and your suit will shut down. Like if you purposefully harm the
It's good.
robot.
It's good. Yeah.
Um, and like, an exosuit tech will come and collect your suit on your behalf if you harm this cute little thing, right? So it's just a lot of it was built around all of that different stuff, trying to get it to function together. And then once we got the artwork, it was so easy to just be like, "Ooh, this is a feature, and that's a feature, and that's something cool that we can do." Um, and then the name of the actual acronym of the name, saying the acronym is the Easter egg, but we don't have a dedicated uh what it means. We actually want
Hmm.
players to come up with that. That's why we actually have it all written, like the in-game scientist is like trying to figure out like what does this acronym mean? I have no idea.
Yeah, I love the notes on that, the different guesses for it.
Yeah. So that's just one of those little things that we would, we love for players to interact with. So as they're thinking, they're like, DSPRT, what does that mean? Like, is it we give them some examples, and then the first time a GM says it out loud and they don't say it as an acronym, people get it and they're
Hmm.
like, the Desperate Mark II. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
oh,
it's good.
well, I don't
Uh,
like that.
from Subsuits LLC. Yeah.
From Subsuits LLC. Yep, exactly. So that, I mean, that's very much our like Fallout-esque and what is it, Outer Worlds, I
Outer
think,
Worlds,
kind
yeah.
of flavor on that. But yeah, so that was kind of what we were going for
It's
with
fantastic.
it.
I really to shout out the art just one more time. It really does, like you said, it's something a scientist would wear. It is a wide open like bubble helmet. It's not meant for defense. It's meant to observe. That's incredibly cool, and that kind of does go into I guess a little bit into character creation,
Mhm.
because whereas you might have some games that will have we'll think of some games like Mothership,
Mhm.
or some of the alien games where you'll have options to be a scientist, or a tech person, or a space marine. In
Yep.
this game, you really are a scientist. That
Yeah.
just a different variety of scientists. There's a lot of ologists listed here.
There
Um,
are, which was a
yeah,
lot of work to put together 20 of them. And
I
some of
bet.
them
Yeah,
I we got to the point where I was just like, do I need to create an appendix that describes what some of these are? And we ended up not yet. I mean, we still have time before this gets sent to the printers. Um, but I think there's something about it of being like, ooh, a geochronologist sounds interesting. What is that? And they pull out their phone and they Google that. And now they're on a Wikipedia page learning all about a new scientific specialty and how they can role play that. I think that's, and so I was just like, I kind of want players to do that instead. Um,
absolutely.
and we do have one kind of not scientist on that list, which is the survival specialist.
Right.
And that's because throughout a lot of gameplay and play testing, you would always have one player that was like, yeah, but I just want to like be a survivalist. Can I do that? And I was like, okay, we need 1 out of 20. 1 out of 20 of them can be a survival specialist.
The science of
Um,
not dying. Yeah.
the science of not dying, exactly. The science of survival.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's why that one's on there. But yeah, the rest of them are, going into microbiologists and linguists and, aerologists, or hydrologists, like the flow of water in the, like how do dams work and the pressure of water and how to use
Yeah.
water in different ways. That'd probably be super helpful when you're going out into a, you know, liquid filled caverns and things like that.
Absolutely.
Um,
There's so many that seem like there would be just obvious pulls for going into a crevice, a chasm into the world. And then there's ones that don't seem obvious. And those, I think, are the more unsettling ones, like linguist or anthropologist or
mhm.
zoologist. I'm sorry, why do we need somebody who knows about animals to go into the center of the earth? Why do we need somebody
Right.
who knows about languages or cultures? And then
Yeah.
finding out that's a really
That's
great pull as well.
important. Yeah. I think what's also interesting is players will come up with interesting ways to use, like, they will build upon the traditional concept of that specialty. Like, for instance, a radiologist. They know about radiation, and usually
Hmm.
it's about X-rays. Um, but they aren't like specialists in controlling alpha particle radiation that's bombard. But now they might be.
Hmm.
right? Now a player character might be like, hey, since I'm a radiologist, I actually know a lot about radiation. I think this is what's happening. What if we did X? And so kind of taking, what is could be it's not a simpler. I don't want to sorry all the radiologists out there, but like something where you would just be like, well, yeah, the radiologist comes in and x-rays my teeth, and that's what a radiologist is, right? Like, oh no, like they are radiation specialists and we're
Absolutely.
surrounded by radiation right now. I think that's one of the cool things to see players take the start of how they understand the specialty and expand on it.
Hmm. I think what also is a fun kind of idea to this is because the world is crumbling, literally.
Mhm.
You get called by, whatever, whether this be a pseudo government organization or all the governments or whatever, you're chosen either because you're the best in your field or you're the last in your field. And
Yes.
or maybe somewhere in between, maybe the top 10 didn't make it. Maybe you're the 11th, maybe you're the 111th
Yeah.
down the list, but you're the one that could get. So I think that also could be really fun to like, yeah, no, I'm an okay hydrologist. Like I taught high school science, but I'm what's closest.
Yeah, so this was inspired. So we actually asked that question so we have a personnel questionnaire that each character answers for
Yeah.
themselves about their own personal world building. And then there's world building questionnaire during character creation that everybody kind of answers together. And one of the questions we asked is how far down the list did they have to go
Hmm.
for you? And this was actually inspired by Battlestar Galactica with President Roslin because she was
Right.
like 30th down the list. She was the Secretary of Education, I believe.
Yeah.
And so when they were like, "You're president now," and she's like, "No, no, no, no. There's like 30 people above me," and they're like, "Yeah, and you're it." And she was like,
Yeah.
"Oh no," right?
Designated
And that's
survivor.
kind
Yeah.
of yep, and that's kind of what I was getting at, where with just like, hey, you're a linguist, and they're like, yeah, I teach like French in or like Egyptian numerology at the community college in Illinois, and they're like, yep, and you're it,
You're it. Yeah.
right? And they're like, cool, and they're gonna go save the world, and that's perfect, right? Like,
That's
so
great.
yeah, it's so fun. The questions that we've laid out, I've had the absolute wonderful opportunity to watch other people do actual plays already of Substratum Protocol and their
Hmm.
world building. The questions I obviously already have answers in my mind of like how people might answer these questions, and watching people answer them and just really like go down the rabbit hole and just really just completely blow my mind of the things that people come up with is has been absolutely fantastic.
Well, if you're down for it, let's do a little character creation here. If you wouldn't
Sure.
mind joining me, let's build a couple of
Yeah.
characters here.
All righty.
Um, so we need a D20 for this. Is
Yes.
that is that all we need for character creation?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think you just need a D20.
Okay.
And players are also allowed to choose.
Of course. Yeah.
But every table is a dice table. If there's a table I could create that could have dice associated with it, we're doing it.
Fair enough.
And a lot of that's for people who don't want to decide, but also any solo players.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
anything that could be a list became a dice list.
Yeah. Build your own team from it. So it looks like our checklist starts with documenting your name. I always save
Yep.
that for the last personally. Um, Pick your scientific specialty. So this is a D20 table. So
Yeah, what do we got?
let's see. I rolled anthropologist.
All
So
right.
all right,
I'm writing this down too. 'Cause I wanna keep track of this.
for sure.
Anthropologist.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Oh, yeah, let me grab a D20. Oh man, do I not have, you know what? We're gonna grab the
See
specialty
how
D20.
close your closest dice are. Yeah, there you go.
My little specialty D20s. I love these
Fantastic.
guys. Yeah. Let's see. Hey, I'm actually a linguist.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
That's
hey.
the two that are confused why they're there.
The
All right.
probability curve, we're hitting it perfectly today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then we'll start with 8 stress capacity. We're going to assign our skills dice.
Yeah.
So those come down to, again, the 6 skills, like you mentioned, were
Make
make,
dash.
dash, evade, break, think, and sway. So we're going to assign D10, D8. D6 is the maximum of the 3. And the other skills start with the D4. So I'm thinking as a,
I'm old school, so
an
I'm literally writing this down on paper
Yeah, absolutely.
while
Yeah,
we're
no,
doing this. It's great.
I did the same thing. One of my players cut me a really nice notepad with like a wrecked ship on it, and it's I
Oh,
was able to run a
nice.
nautical game, so it's perfect. Um, I am thinking
Let's see.
as an anthropologist, I should probably put think, sway, and evade as my top three, probably in that order. And then I don't think there'll be a particularly breaking or making kind of anthropologist. But I think
So,
those skills are important as an anthropologist. You go to visit,
yeah.
new peoples, new cultures. You've got to think your way. You've got to sway, and then if you piss them off, you've got to get away. So
Yeah,
I did not
exactly,
mean to rhyme.
exactly. That was actually really good. That was
Yeah,
really good
no,
though.
yeah, that's thanks. I'm glad
Yeah,
we're
so I'm
recording
gonna
this
do um so a D10 in think because linguist, that does make sense as
for
well.
sure, for sure.
Um sway of a D6 and then dash. Did you do dash or evade?
I did evade.
Okay, so I'm gonna do the D8 in dash, and that
I like that.
means make, break, and evade are all D4s. Now, we do have an optional rule here that says you can reduce your stress capacity from 8 to 6 to bump up one of your skills
Mm.
by one step. So that is also an option.
I think I'm going to pass on that as a not particularly stressed anthropologist, a more laid back anthropologist.
I think I'll actually spend a stress or my two stress, and I'm going to bump my break up to a D6. I think I like to hammer on things sometimes in order
Hmm.
to solve my problems and make my way through learning languages.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I'm tearing up note cards, my flashcards all the time.
All right.
Um,
So then we move on to starting items.
yes.
Okay.
So actually, what would I do? I would
Uh,
say, yeah, go ahead.
I just
I'm
while you're thinking, I'm gonna throw out a couple of things that I think are really great on here. Shield generator, drone, obviously, magnetometer, laser Gatling gun, gravity generator, your handy dandy binoculars. You never know when you're gonna need them. Measuring laser, just so definitely some thought went into this. I'm gonna roll here.
oh yeah.
I actually got a 1. So I will be taking the
You
laser Gatling gun.
you're an anthropologist that is ready.
This is ready. Yeah, like that feels like an anthropologist who was just handed a laser Gatling gun. It goes, you're gonna need this, son.
Yeah. So I got a 15. So I'll actually have a density sensor. So
That
I will be
that
able to
seems very
measure
handy,
the density of rocks and other materials, which will be might be able to
and I'll be
find
able to
some
shoot
weak
through them.
openings or weak closings.
Yeah,
And then yeah, and then you can blast them open.
and
This
then
is
yeah,
perfect.
with weak or strong, I have a laser Gatling gun.
Perfect.
All
Yeah,
right,
and then those start as D10 items.
fantastic.
And so basically you can use that in place of a skill at that point.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah. And so that, besides answering our questions, which we can do next.
Yeah, let's so first personnel question here. Let's see. Now, do you recommend that people like maybe just roll a couple of times, roll just once, or like, or if you're really getting into character creation, do all of them? What do you think would kind of be the best recommendation for first time play?
Yeah, so I would do pick either roll four or pick three questions that call to you
Cool,
off the personnel questionnaire for each character, and then three questions total off the world building. And then obviously, if you're really getting into world building, as part of your session 0, then you can ask more questions.
fantastic. And there are some great questions on here. You kind of mentioned before, like um, how far down do they have to go on the list to find you. There's stuff that has to do with past, but also drive, which I think is
Mhm.
also always really important as a character. So, you know, the how'd you end up on the team, but then what's your greatest fear? What's your relationship with your exosuit? I think is great because some people
Yeah,
can like be really pro, like, oh, I can't love this thing protects me, and some people are like, I hate lugging this thing around. I feel
right.
like claustrophobic just inside this thing.
I just sweat all the time. I feel constantly damp. Like,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's like a mascot outfit. It's just, you know, why didn't they install fans in this thing?
yep,
Um, have you ever had to compromise your ethics? I think is great too. It starts to create almost like inner villains in the team, like some almost Lost in Space-esque characters that have
yeah.
yeah. Um, how do you deal with failures or setbacks? Who did you leave behind when you joined the team? Any notable quirks or habits? Yeah, I think there's some really great ones. I rolled an 18, so what kind of research have you previously conducted? Um, let's see, anthropologists doing previous research. I think my last paper was on the changing of society during the apocalypse. It did not get published, but that's because the publishing company fell into a void. But it's still a really great paper. What's your
Into the
relationship?
fracture itself. It is. We'll find it on the expedition.
It's down
You can
there
turn it in.
somewhere. Yeah. It's a very hardy thumb drive.
Yeah.
Um, what's your relationship with your family like? Um, anthropologist. I think probably the my parents say they're proud. There's a question mark sometimes, and well, you know,
Yeah.
academics come first. You know how it is.
Yep.
And then five. What inspired you to become a scientist? Um, what inspires anybody to be an anthropologist? Um, I say that really digging at
Lost
anthropologists here.
civilizations.
Yeah, I had
Dinosaurs.
that. Yes, there's it's the culture of dinosaurs. I actually did have, as somebody who has a degree in psych, I had a fantastic anthropology professor in college. I loved that woman. She's one of the best professors I ever had. Um, she made me promise never to go into anthropology, so maybe it was just that one little like coin flip change where you have a great teacher that inspires you to do something. We'll go with
I
that.
love that.
Yeah,
All right. Was that your
those
three?
those are my three. Yeah.
All right, let's see what we got. So we got eight. How do you feel about exploring an unknown world? Um, I think as the linguist, like I've become so used to just like sitting with my books in order to learn and study and research. I would be incredibly nervous. I would be the person that's just like shaking and feeling sick and nauseous that I am here at all.
Hmm.
I think is exactly. There's a little bit of excitement of like if I found a new language, but I would be super confused as to why I'm going down into the earth because there won't be any languages in my mind there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Clearly
It's
there is though.
it reminds me of that quote. It's either we're totally alone in the universe or we're not. Um, either one is equally
Right.
terrifying. Yeah.
Yes.
Either there's languages down there, or there's not. Either one's equally terrifying.
Yep. And then I rolled a 20. Who did you leave behind when you joined the team? Um, oh, I'll say that I had to leave behind a child.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and maybe I was a single parent. Um, and so that was this character is going to be all sorts of traumatized.
I
But
was gonna
yeah,
say you're the guy with
they're
the
rolling. Hey, the
picture.
dice are
Yeah.
doing it to me.
Doing a
Um,
full Ben Affleck here in Armageddon.
right. Child was left behind. Yeah, you know what? I left them with their grandparents. They're doing great. They know I'm off trying to save the world. But I miss them.
Love
Yeah.
that.
And then what do we got? We got nine. What is your opinion on the portal and its potential uses? My opinion on the portal, I'm terrified of it. In its potential uses, all I know is that there's the scientists or the computer experts that have been trying to like analyze the data that we're getting back from it have gone comatose. So I'm just scared of it. Honestly, as I feel is what it is. Like, how are we gonna not become comatose as we, try to understand the portal? I'm confused, right? Like that kind of
Yeah,
feeling on
I
it.
feel like that question gets raised in orientation, like, well, we're just gonna burn that bridge when we come to it.
Right? Yeah. And then yeah, then we've got so that's the three of mine. So then
Right.
we've got the world building questionnaire.
World building questions, absolutely. So let's see here. It's a five. What kind of life forms have exited the fissure already? Oh, super. Awesome. Okay.
I love
Um,
this.
that's see again going back to Flesh Pit National Park, that's immediately where my brain goes. That's just like these horrifying things of how is this twisted? Why is it different than anything
Yep.
else on Earth? Um, yeah, I'm gonna say they're cephalopod-esque, but
Ooh, nice.
there's just like there's an odd number of limbs, and it's just like seven-limbed, and
How
it's
big
like
are they?
I'm gonna put it this way, too big. Like coconut
Too big.
crabs, like
Perfect.
coconut crabs are too big for crabs.
Yeah.
Spider crabs, but like even bigger than that, where it's like, no, no, no,
Okay.
you go back in. This is
Right.
not this isn't where you go.
Perfect.
Let's see. That's a 20.
Ooh.
I should use these
We got
dice
three
more
20.
often. Are there any rumors or legends about what might be found? I think
Ooh.
if they're sending an anthropologist and a linguist, there's probably rumors that there might be civilization down there, or what used to be civilization down there. I don't think they'd be sending us yahoos if they didn't think that.
Right? I'd like to think that there's like whiteboards like within the Fracture Observatory, like as we're like being herded to like the places, like we can like see this like alien writing on whiteboards occasionally,
Definitely,
and we're
yeah.
like, what is that? And they're like, don't worry about it right now. And you're like, shouldn't I
There's
know?
one scientist they've locked away in a room who just keeps drawing pyramids. Like,
Oh my God.
don't worry about
Don't worry
him.
about him.
He's fine. He gets
He's
applesauce
fine.
twice a day. He's fine.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Poor
And
guy.
then nine. What is a known issue with the exosuit design? Um, Too sexy, too
It's
appealing.
too appealing.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
attracts monsters and
It really
creatures
does.
to it.
The
Not monsters,
bright red.
creatures.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
bright red, that cherry red design turns out to be the only color that these creatures can see. Weirdly
Yep.
enough.
Oddly enough. Yeah, it glows in UV light.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great. Yeah.
just and they didn't even think about that while they were painting the outside of it. They had UV reactive light or paint.
They've
It's
also got
amazing.
the like when they walk, the boots light up like
Oh,
90s
like
kid
a
shoes.
yeah, the
Yeah.
kids shoes.
it-
And
yeah.
they do the little like running light towards the front of the foot so you know which way. They're like,
Exactly.
so you know which way
There's
they're
no
running.
function. It's only just features, no function.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I love both of them. I love all of that. Yeah, and so that's where, like, so that's character creation. We've answered
That's awesome.
yeah. And so, that gives a pretty good baseline of like where to start and how people are generally feeling about the whole event. Um,
Yeah.
and I was talking with, I forget who I was talking with. I was talking with Mario from a Spanish community. They're a Mexican publisher.
Hmm.
And they asked the question about mission control and these world building questions. And so the GM plays mission control. Mission control is the person sitting behind the radio directing and talking to the scientists within the
Right.
game, but they're also the GM, right? And so part of why we had these world building questions around like, what are the social norms in the Fracture Observatory? What are rumors happening in the Fracture Observatory, right? Is it's world building for the GM. So the GM knows how to act when they're on the radio and asking because they're technically a character in the game as
Hmm.
well. And so, it's something that we love to play with is having a GM actually be a character. Not all characters, but like this is you. And you also happen to be narrating things. And so the world building questions within the Fracture Observatory, because the players don't spend much time there, right? The idea is that they're not there.
Right. Yeah. Get
Is
out. Go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Is so the GM is like, okay, well, what's happening in the Fracture Observatory? I'm mission control. I'm radioing down to these people. They're radioing up to me for answers. How do I
Hmm.
respond as mission control? Um, is yeah, is it wasn't initially obvious as to like, while we were writing out these world building questions, like everything below us is unknown. So why are we spending time building out the Fracture Observatory? And I was like, this is why. Um, which is, it's been fun. It's been fun to design all of those questions for really Mission Control, the character of Mission Control.
That is really cool. I also love the quality that Mission Control can go silent sometimes.
Yes,
That yeah, that you don't get things, and maybe that's maybe that's because something's gone wrong. Maybe it's because Carol in HR has a birthday and they're grabbing a slice of cake,
that's
like right
exactly
when
it.
you need them. That's a great complication to throw. Is Mission Control stepped away for the moment?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it is really this is such a fantastic game. It is
thank you.
very well thought out. The it is built so incredibly well for a variety of play styles, which I just looking at this recognize as being very difficult to do. And so I have to give you all the
Yeah.
credit for that and for the people that worked with you for making a beautiful game in the sense of the structure of the book itself and the artwork, but also in the sense of streamlined gameplay and for something that is very narratively interesting. Um, as we're kind of getting towards the end here, is there anything that we haven't touched on in this game that you'd really like to spotlight further? Is there anything else that you really wanted to specifically note?
Um, I think we covered everything. Just the one thing I want to note is anybody that does play this, everything that we give in the book are suggestions and ways to play and things like that. The rule of cool, rule zero always applies, and the answers at the table always take precedence over anything in the book. And you're always allowed to add and build and create regardless of what it says. I mean, it might not even be a portal at the center of the earth. And we love people doing that. So all players, all GMs that ever decide to pick up this game, be inspired by it, but don't be beholden to it.
Very well said.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Um, love a game that again creates the mystery, makes the suggestion, allows you to think for yourself, doesn't give you the answers, doesn't hold your hand. It really shows a lot of trust in the people that play these games and their own, narrative abilities. And just in case this might be the first game you ever run, I wouldn't be worried about this. I think this would be a fantastic game to be your first entry into TTRPGs, or especially if you played some TTRPGs but haven't run some, this would be a fantastic way to GM your first game because the tools are presented to you, but there is just enough support there. It's not hand-holding, but it's enough support that you can feel confident moving forward and that you will tell a great story with whoever's at your table, even if you were the only person at your table. It would be a great solo game as well. Um, Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this game with us. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Where can people find more of yourself? Where can we find more of Substratum Protocol? Of
So first off, thank you so much for having me. And
course.
all of the super kind words. That means the absolute world to me. Um, so people can find us on pandiongames.com. That's where we sell both digital and physical games that we make. They can find more about Substratum and the campaign that we're running at pandiongames.com/substratum. That link will go to the campaign page while it's active, pre-order page, and then ultimately the purchase page. So you'll always be able to get to Substratum using that link. And then we're also on socials, pretty much every social media platform that exists right now. You can find us, and we are Pandion Games on all of them. Feel free to follow us and reach out. We are always happy to answer questions and help you play our games. So we're happy to hear from you. Yeah, that's that's me. And thank you so much for having us on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Of course, the pleasure's literally all ours. love all the games that we see come out of Pandion. We love speaking to yourself and all the people that you work with. I can see the stone burner artwork in the background behind you there.
Yep.
Yeah, another fantastic game that we talked about, and I can see a lot of the same kind of like thought going into those games as well. I personally cannot wait to run a stone burner game because Space Dwarves is fantastic.
It's
Eva has
great.
already it's so great. Eva has already been messaging me in the background about running this game. So uh can't wait to play this stuff. It's so cool, and obviously the themes are definitely something that click with a lot of people. Thank you again to Andy. Thank you to Pandion Games. Definitely check out Substratum Protocol. 11 more days to support that backer
Yes.
kit. It is already funded, but please hit those other goals and get a copy for yourself. It is something you will want to have on your bookshelf, and I guarantee you will take it off that bookshelf many, many times. It will not gather dust. Um, for Sword and Key, I am Derek Sword. I use he, him pronouns. Thank you again to all of you for joining us, for showing some support, for spending some time with us, even if you're catching the VOD later. Hi, thank you. This is Time Travel. To share a little bit about what Sword and Key is doing in the near future, you can find all of our stuff at beacons.ai/sword and key. All of our links in there, our social media, our you can join our Discord there. You can find our discount codes for Eldritch Foundry if you're looking to get custom minis, for Greenleaf Geek Dice if you're looking to get yourself a beautiful custom set of dice. You can use code Sword and Key for 10% off both those sites. We also have an ongoing charity campaign for Palestine Children Release Fund. You can find that on our beacons as well. There are no ongoing incentives for any of our games. It's just a great organization that you can support at any time. Just do a little bit of extra good in this world. Our social media is mostly sword_and_key. And again, that's Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. If you hang out on our Discord, you get to hang out with cool people, talk about cool things, and do cool stuff. If we ever have game applications, they arrive first to our Discord, our social media second. We also, as we'll talk about the calendar here, have movie nights that occur in our Discord that happen every other week. And that's the one place to watch some movies with us. So, looking at our calendar here, there it is. Uh, Earlier today, if you didn't catch it, we had the second half of You're in Space and Everything's Fucked with Eva and um, Anik. And you can catch that on our VODs, the first half of it being last week on the 7th. Looking forward, it's not at a Sword and Key thing, or like I guess it's kind of a holiday. It's tax day. Do your taxes. It's important. Don't forget. The 16th, every Tuesday, including the 16th, we have Gate Night, which is where I play with my friends LD and Shadow right here on Sword and Key, and we play Baldur's Gate 3 as we take our weird little Forgotten Realms characters through all the hijinks and shenanigans and adventuring romance, and it's going to be great. We just got Carlock. We're still in Act 1, so we've got a long way to go. But that is play weekly on Tuesdays. As I mentioned, Sword and Key movie nights happen every other Friday. Our next one is coming up on the 19th, where we are doing our monthly Ghibli movie watch with Kiki's Delivery Service. Horizon's Call, the nautical D&D campaign that I run with my friends here, is back every Saturday, including the 20th, 3 p.m. Pacific time. On the 21st, we'll have the next episode of the podcast to do with my friend LD, Monster Crush. Monster Crush is a podcast about cryptids, creatures, miscellaneous monsters, and how smoochable they are. This next episode is a fun one. It's going to be about some fearsome critters. So if you're familiar with lumberjack tales and things like the Gumbaroo and the Snallygaster, this will be a good one. Um, Monster Crush releases every other week. Again, Gate Night is weekly. Horizon's Call is weekly. The other thing to shout out, this is definitely more of a holiday and something that will kind of affect Sword and Key. On the 18th, it is my mom's birthday. It's Mama Sword's birthday. She's the whole reason that I'm here. She's the reason I like nerdy shit. So it is a holiday for this channel. Shout out to Mama Sword. We will be doing a charity campaign for Canine Companions for Independence, which is an organization that is very near and dear to my family. And we'll be posting about that. So should you want to donate to some really cute puppies that do a lot of good in this world, we will have links out for that as well soon. Other than that, we're looking to bring back some stuff in the near future, including our Humblewood game for season 2 and more great stuff. Again, those applications will be on Discord first and social media second. That is it for this episode of Sword and Tea. Thank you again for joining us. I don't think we have anything else at this moment. So take care of yourselves, take care of others, and we will see you again soon.